The Battle of Long Island, also known as the Battle of Brooklyn or the Battle of Brooklyn Heights, took place on August 27, 1776, and was the first major battle since the United States declared independence on July 4th, the same year. It was also the largest battle of the Revolutionary War, both in terms of troop deployment and the number of combatants. The battle ended in a decisive British victory, highlighting the significant challenges that General George Washington and his Continental Army would face in their quest for independence. Despite the defeat, the battle underscored the importance of strategic retreats and the resilience of the American cause. The conflict arose as part of the British strategy to crush the rebellion by seizing control of New York City, a vital center for trade, communication, and military operations. After being forced out of Boston in March 1776 following the successful Patriot Siege, British General William Howe set his sights on New York as the next target for regaining royal control. The British High Command believed that New York's strategic location, combined with the possibility of Loyalist support, could help isolate New England from the rest of the colonies and effectively end the rebellion. In April 1776, George Washington moved his army from Boston to New York City, anticipating a British attack. He set up defensive positions on Manhattan Island and across the East River on Long Island, particularly in Brooklyn Heights. Washington's army, comprising approximately 20,000 men, included both Continental soldiers and state militias. Many of these troops were undertrained, lacked supplies, and had no combat experience. Nonetheless, Washington hoped to fortify the city and repel the impending British attack. The British, for their part, began an extensive military buildup. General William Howe was accompanied by his brother, Admiral Richard Howe, who commanded the Royal Navy. By the middle of July, they had brought over 32,000 soldiers and sailors to Staten Island, including British regulars, Hessian mercenaries from Germany, and Loyalist volunteers. The British intended to use naval superiority to surround and isolate New York, while launching a large-scale land assault on Long Island to breach American defenses. As tensions rose in New York, the Howes pursued a diplomatic approach. Admiral Richard Howe, who sympathized with the colonial cause, sent messages to the Continental Congress in Philadelphia proposing a negotiated settlement in exchange for a cessation of hostilities. However, by that time, the Declaration of Independence had been signed, and Congress refused to negotiate until Britain recognized American sovereignty. With diplomacy rejected, the Howes braced for war. Washington distributed his forces between Manhattan and Long Island. He delegated command of the defense of Brooklyn Heights on Long Island to Major General Israel Putnam, who was assisted by generals such as John Sullivan and Lord Stirling. The Americans established a series of defensive positions along the Heights of Guan, a ridgeline that ran east of Brooklyn Heights and provided a natural defensive barrier. The Americans fortified key passages through the ridge, such as the Gowanus Road, Flatbush Pass, and Jamaica Pass. However, the Americans failed to adequately defend the Jamaica Pass, believing that the dense forest and distance from the harbor would deter a British attack. On August 22, 1776, the British launched their offensive by landing approximately 15,000 troops at Gravesend Bay, on Long Island's southwestern tip. The Americans observed the landing, but did not immediately engage, hoping to save their strength for a defensive battle. General Howe, having learned from previous mistakes such as the costly frontal assaults on Bunker Hill, chose a more calculated and strategic approach. He planned a flanking attack to encircle and trap the American defenders via the Jamaica Pass. General Howe launched his plan on the night of August 26th. He dispatched General James Grant with 5,000 troops to launch a feint against the American positions on the Gowanus Road, attracting attention and reinforcements. Meanwhile, a larger force of 10,000 men led by Howe, along with Generals Henry Clinton and Charles Cornwallis, marched quietly north and then east to the Jamaica Pass. The British successfully crossed the pass with the assistance of local Loyalist guides before turning south toward the American rear. At dawn on August 27th, the British feint began in earnest. General Grant's troops confronted Lord Stirling's American forces near the Gowanus Road. Stirling's men, unaware of the impending encirclement, held their ground resolutely. Simultaneously, Hessian troops under General Leopold von Heister attacked the Flatbush Pass, where General Sullivan led another American contingent. Sullivan's men also fought valiantly but were overwhelmed when Howe's flanking column emerged from the Jamaica Pass and attacked from behind. Caught in a pincer movement, the American forces were quickly thrown into chaos. General Sullivan was apprehended during the melee, and many of his men were killed or taken prisoner. Lord Stirling, realizing the trap, organized a desperate rear-guard action that allowed the majority of his men to flee. He led 400 Maryland troops, later dubbed the Maryland 400, in a valiant stand against massive British forces near the old stone house. Their sacrifice enabled hundreds of American troops to flee across the Gowanus marshes to Brooklyn Heights, but the majority of the Marylanders were killed or apprehended. By the end of the day, the Americans had lost approximately 1,000 people, with more than 300 killed and hundreds more captured. In contrast, British casualties were less than 400. The British had performed a near-perfect tactical maneuver, flanking and outmaneuvering the American defenses. The remaining American forces retreated to fortified positions in Brooklyn Heights, bracing for what many believed to be the final British assault. However, General Howe hesitated. Despite having the American army at his disposal, he chose not to launch an immediate attack on the American entrenched positions. Historians have questioned his motivations. Some argue that Howe wanted to avoid unnecessary bloodshed and compel Washington to surrender. Others believe the British were awaiting the arrival of their siege artillery, or were concerned about heavy casualties in an assault on well-defended positions. Washington, realizing the gravity of his situation, began planning an evacuation. He feared that the British Navy would soon enter the East River, cutting off his escape from Brooklyn to Manhattan. Washington ordered the withdrawal of his entire army across the river on the night of August 29th. 30. Washington's men transported over 9,000 soldiers, as well as horses, artillery, and supplies, under the cover of darkness and a providential fog that lingered into the early morning hours. The retreat was one of the most impressive achievements of the Revolutionary War. No man, cannon, or wagon was lost. Washington personally oversaw the evacuation, ensuring that it was conducted in silence and order. The British awoke the following morning to find the American positions abandoned. The Continental Army had avoided annihilation and would live to fight another day. The Battle of Long Island was a significant defeat for the Americans, but not a strategic disaster. Washington's successful retreat saved the Continental Army, the heart of America's war effort. If the army had been captured or destroyed, the war could have ended by 1776. Instead, the battle signaled the start of a long, brutal campaign that would put Washington's leadership and the army's resilience to the test. The contributions of key leaders from both sides were critical. While General George Washington's decision to fortify Brooklyn was a risk, it was also a sound strategic move. His leadership during the retreat demonstrated his ability to remain calm under pressure and his unwavering commitment to the army. Despite criticism for his defensive dispositions, General Israel Putnam fought valiantly and did his best under difficult circumstances. Lord Stirling's bravery and the Maryland 400 stand have become legendary in American history. On the British side, General Howe performed a textbook flanking maneuver, resulting in a clear battlefield victory. However, his failure to seize the initiative and destroy the American army remains one of the most contentious decisions of the war. Some argue that he squandered an opportunity to end the rebellion, while others say that he acted wisely, avoiding unnecessary casualties. Admiral Richard Howe, although not directly involved in the battle, played a crucial role in coordinating naval movements and subsequently attempted diplomatic negotiations. Generals Charles Cornwallis and Clinton gained valuable experience during the campaign and went on to play essential roles in later British operations in the war. The battle had significant historical and political ramifications. It exposed the vulnerability of American forces and highlighted the difficulties of facing a professional European army. The colony's morale dipped, and some questioned Washington's leadership. The Continental Congress, while remaining supportive, became more cautious and began to consider ways to reform and strengthen the military. The defeat also forced a rethinking of American military strategy. Washington began to recognize the futility of defending fixed positions against superior British forces. He adopted a more mobile, adaptable strategy that prioritized retreat, surprise, and attrition. This approach would characterize much of the rest of the war, ultimately contributing to American victory. The British, buoyed by their victory, captured New York City and established it as their primary base of operations for the remainder of the war. Manhattan fell in September 1776, and subsequent engagements, such as the battles of Harlem Heights, White Plains, and Fort Washington, weakened American control over the region. Until the war's end, New York served as a loyalist stronghold and a center for British military activity. However, the war was far from over. Washington's army, while battered, remained intact. Later in 1776, he launched a surprise attack on Trenton and Princeton, reviving morale and demonstrating that the American cause was not lost. The Battle of Long Island, while a tactical defeat, demonstrated the Continental Army's endurance and resourcefulness. In retrospect, the battle serves as a case study in military strategy, leadership, and the unpredictable nature of war. It demonstrated the importance of intelligence, terrain, and timing. It also emphasized the importance of cooperation, patience, and adaptability in the face of overwhelming odds.